Coming up, let's talk cargo volumes. Like, how the hell do they actually measure them, the boot space and the ute space and the volume in a van? And can you actually trust what the manufacturer claims about this? Which leads us to me showing you how Toyota is misrepresenting the new Hiace's cargo volume. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au, and I get new cars cheap for buyers here in Australia. Website for that, up there's there. Or you can just click the card, which I measured to the German automotive industry standard and chucked in that vague direction now, dude. Today's report arises as a consequence of a tirade from you in the comments. Well, at least from those of you who can read the spec sheets on Hiace and Staria Load, but seemingly don't have access to a calculator or the will to use it. Wait, only 5 cubic meters on capacity? The Hiace is 6.2 cubic meters, and the old 200 series Hiace had 6 cubic meters. That's a massive deal. Funny you didn't mention that, John. It's a flat-out conspiracy, Michael. We're all getting paid under the table to take Toyota down. I blame the fluoride in the water and the radiation from the Van Allen belts, which is why we never went to the moon, dude. And how can you orbit the Earth anyway, seeing as it's flat? Like, that just wouldn't work. Dude, Toyota is obviously bullshitting about the cargo volume of the low-roof serial killer's Hiace, and by that I mean they are selectively misrepresenting the volume to make the vehicle seem better than it is and than the competition is, when in fact it's not. Same size within millimetres belies the inconvenient fact that Staria Load capacity of 4,935 litres is 26% less than the Hiace 6,200 litres. Would have, though, capacity was a critical consideration for many buyers. Not one of your better independent reports. Actually, Greg, they are within millimetres, and I thought that report, which I will link to up there, was one of my better ones. I guess that's a subjective determination. I especially enjoyed the bit where I described the Staria Load's external aesthetics as, quote, ridiculous, and the Staria van's novel marketing mascot, that chap right there, as, quote, miniature Asian Carl Sagan, which is actually the role he is cast in that ad. That assessment of him by me was just shy of literary genius in my view. Almost but not quite Hemingway kind of thing. I guess that's subjective too. But what's not subjective is this is how you can rest assured that Hyundai is not giving me some undignified, under-the-table reach around, which is a common but completely unfounded accusation in the comments. Like I give a shit. A reviewer, however, such as me, could not say things such as that and expect the subterranean backhanders to continue, because those kind of arrangements, they just don't work that way. In my view, today's two special guest genius commenters, Greg and Michael, well, they need to go back to school and get their masters in box measuring and perhaps even their PhDs in volume calculating. And I'm just trying to be helpful because these are valuable life skills. So, Toyota details the load space in the Jim's serial killer Hiace in this PDF. Right there, they do. Grab a calculator and hit pause and check it out for yourself if you don't trust me, which I suggest you don't, because you should independently verify everything to the extent that that's possible. And I think we should start here with a simple volumetric idea, which even Greg or Michael from earlier might understand. And this would be that a box cannot be bigger inside than the number you get when you multiply the length, width, and height. Like, dude, it just can't. Unless it's Doctor Who's friggin' TARDIS. So, Toyota says the Hiace cargo volume is 6.2 cubic metres. And they say it fairly unequivocally right there. Well done, Greg and Michael, for being able to read the spec sheet. The education train didn't leave you on the platform every day. Thank God. Weights, mass, volume dimensions are approximate and subject to individual vehicle variances and should be confirmed before fitting any accessories, towing or otherwise relying on this value. I agree wholeheartedly. That's great advice. Toyota cannot be trusted to tell you precisely about its products. So, regarding Toyota's box, and I never thought I'd say that live in front of you, Toyota claims its Hiace cargo box is 2,530 long in millimetres by 1760 wide and 1340 high. Multiply it out, dude, and remember to divide by 1 million to get it in litres. Hit pause if you want, and I will wait patiently. It's 5,966 litres, or 5.966 cubic metres. And we haven't yet taken out the wheel arches and the radii along the edges where the floor joins the walls and the roof joins the walls and things of that nature, and in the corners of the box as well. There has to be about 100 litres just in the friggin' wheel arches. So we seem to be missing about 300 litres of actual internal cargo volume inside the friggin' box. Hold that thought. Hyundai has the specs on the ugliest van ever in that PDF right there. Length, width and height, 2607 times 1640 times 1436, divide by 1 million, equals 6,140 litres. But what they claim is 4,935. It's right there, right? Quote, cargo area dash VDA 4,935 litres. Cargo area, spare me. This VDA business, Verband der Automobilindustrie, or German Auto Industry Association, dude. This is kind of the standard, well, like the most common standard for measuring internal cargo volumes in vehicles, right? Essentially what they do under this system is they use little blocks of anything, notionally wood, but who gives a flying fuck because they're just there to take up space. It could be blocks of compressed feathers or, plutonium. Best not to use plutonium, however. That's a good rule for life, actually. Anyway, each block is 100 by 50 and 200 long in millimetres, right, which is 1 litre per block, okay? And then what they do is they just jam a whole bunch of blocks in as effectively as they can, as efficiently as they can, like a big insomnia-curing game of freaking Tetris. And they count how many blocks fit, and there's your cargo volume. That's how they measure it under this standard, okay? This is a more or less level playing field way of accounting for things such as internal curves and cross members and boot hinges and wheel arches and all of the things which impinge on actual useful internal volume inside a vehicle. And I'll give you an example, okay? Hyundai claims 395 litres of boot space for the current i30 hatch and 381 litres for the i30N hatch. And yet these two vehicles use exactly the same body shell. The N has a tubular crossmember, like a suspension brace at the rear, inside the boot, and thus 14 fewer VDA blocks fit inside, right? Some US car makers use a different standard, the SAE standard, which uses smaller blocks and therefore usually achieves a higher number on the volume front. And some manufacturers just claim the volume without attributing it to any standard at all. And I'd like to think those last manufacturers, including Ford, Holden, Nissan, companies like that, they just shovel in bullshit and then decant it and measure it in a flask. But they probably just make it up instead. Because this is the point of standards, right? You've got to use them to standardise the results. Toyota and Hyundai both use the German standards, so any difference there is not attributable to a different standard, right? And I don't think anyone uses actual physical blocks anymore either, just to put this in perspective. They've got the precise CAD data for all of the vehicles, so some in-house AI probably just figures out how many blocks would ultimately fit, like hypothetically. Paperclip maximizer kind of thing. Actually, if you want to learn more about the future nightmare hellscape of AI, just Google the term paperclip maximizer. It's a kind of thought experiment. Great for terrifying the grandkids at Christmas. So, what's going on here with Toyota and the internal volume disparity versus Hyundai kind of thing? How do we get to the bottom of this problem? To Greg from earlier, I'd say I absolutely stand by my comment yesterday that the cargo space of Staria load and the Hiace are the same size within millimetres. Staria's is 77 millimetres longer than Hiace and 94 millimetres taller, and Hiace is 120 wider, okay? It's not very much, dude, in the context of the size of those vehicles. But the volume of the box cannot be bigger than the box's dimensions. Like, it just can't. And it's not subtle curvature of the walls and the roof and things of that nature, because the floor, sides, the ends, and the roof are virtually flat in both cases. Just look at the diagrams, look at the shots. They're boxes on wheels. It's the cargo barrier, dude, inside the Staria load. The Hiace doesn't have one as standard because Toyota are kind of cheap pricks like that. So they're cooking the books by shifting the seats forward and even putting those VDA Tetris blocks between the seats disingenuously to inflate the cargo volume claim so that dumb shits just look at the number and go, oh, bigger, that must be better. In order to get 6.2 cubic metres out of a Hiace, you need to fudge about 300 litres of volume by jamming the seats forward as far as they go and by stacking the chainsaws or whatever in the real world right to the freaking ceiling between the driver and the passenger. Crunch the numbers for yourself and confirm this, okay? It's not that hard. If you can calculate the volume of a box, you can do this. And I'd suggest this is the only way that this claim by them about the cargo volume is achievable. To put this another way, just for clarity, okay? You cannot put 6.2 cubic metres of boxes in the back of a Hiace. You just can't. Not with all of those boxes behind the seats and the seats themselves in a reasonable position for the median human occupant. You could have a crack if you doubt me. Just cut yourself up 6,200 convenient blocks of wood, all 100 by 50 by 200 long, and see how many fit. Because I'm tipping you're going to have about 400 or 500 of those blocks left on the floor if you try it, and that number will be more like 1,000 of those blocks left behind on the floor if you fit a cargo barrier to yo Hiace first. The actual cargo space of a Hiace, like if you fit a cargo barrier and stack shit in the back space, is actually something like 150 litres less than a Staria load, okay? And I base this on the raw dimensional information from each manufacturer of the load space box in the back. Like, that's close, dude, and probably too close to call without actual Tetris block measurement, right? What's probably more significant is how that space is different, because the Toyota is wider, whereas the Hyundai is longer and taller. So I guess it depends what you're going to carry in your van. If you're thinking of opening a gym serial killer franchise, it probably doesn't much matter. But I'd suggest this kind of selective, intentional misrepresentation of the actual cargo space by Toyota is flat out disgraceful.